Clip myself here. Not a lot of clipping to do. There's no pockets for clips. All right. Well, I'm David Borrok. I'm happy to be here today to talk to you a little bit about water sustainability. And when I touch upon you, that it's a global problem, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But it's also a local issue that I think is really important, and I'll share with you a few stories. But also impress upon you that it's a multidisciplinary problem, so there's a lot of involvement that could happen. So part of the problem is water quality. Over 25 million people in the world today don't have access to clean drinking water, if you can believe that. In fact, between 5 and 10 million people die every year from waterborne pathogens. So it's a real human tragedy that's going on. At the same time, you have a lot of water quantity issues, and they play into each other, certainly. You have population demanding more water for lots of things, certainly irrigation for food, eating, drinking, but also climate change is forcing a lot of these things to happen too. But it's not just in other parts of the world. In the US, we hear about it quite a bit in areas like the Southwest. We have a lot of reservoirs that have been going dry over time. The example here is Lake Powell. But cities like Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and others may not have water in the next 50 years. But one of the most interesting things that's happened, I think, in the last 10 years is that we've come to realize that we don't have enough water in the Southeast, amazingly enough, or in the Gulf Coast areas. So no one knew this probably until about a decade ago, but we're losing water at a terribly rapid rate. And you might ask yourself, like I did when I heard this, how can that possibly be? Because we flood all the time. We have tremendous amounts of rainfall. We have marshes, surface water bodies, all of the surface water, but the surface water turns out not to really be the issue. Instead, it's groundwater. So we're overusing our groundwater in the state of Louisiana and all along the Gulf Coast tremendously. To give you an example, the Chico aquifer system, which we use for our drinking water, is overdrafted by an average 350 million gallons per day. So that's how much more we're using than is available. To give you an idea of what's happened in the last 50 years with our use of groundwater in the state of Louisiana, you see in 1960, the number of wells we have that are pumping from our aquifer systems compared to 2010. So in 50 years, we've increased our water consumption by an order of magnitude largely. So myself and a lot of others at UL are working on an NSF grant on water sustainability and climate, the purpose of which is to try and re-envision the way we use surface water in these regions, specifically in the Chico region in Louisiana, but also throughout the Gulf Coast, and try and find ways to better manage it to offset that groundwater use. Some of the things that we do are water budgeting. It's a tricky process. There's so much data out there at different scales, and so we need people who are involved in making the data, putting it on the same temporal and spatial scales so we can analyze it. So we've been doing a lot of that, so we can get to points like this where we can look at water stress on very small spatial scales. We call them water management scales. It's the first time people have done this on this sort of small scale watershed. It's quite a feat. But people who actually use the water need those sorts of scales to manage. To give you an idea of the kinds of things we've been finding, if you look at just the groundwater stress, the areas that you see in red are areas where we're taking more groundwater out than is actually replenished on an annual basis. So there's a lot of areas in Louisiana, including the Chico here, which has some tremendous problems. And so we're working on those. We also have social components. I said it's multidisciplinary. We have people working on talking to the stakeholders, farmers, industry in the region, and trying to figure out what makes people use groundwater versus surface water if they had a choice in that. And we found a lot of neat things. It turns out sometimes you just have to ask people to learn things. We also have some more fancier things we do. We have hydrodynamic models. There's a fellow at McNeese State named Zhang who's working on those. So we can predict what would happen to our water system if we pull water out of one area. We can figure out what will happen in another area. We also had architecture and design students working on our projects. We had a class a couple summers ago where students went out, we did field trips, we talked to farmers in the region, and then they built designs to figure out how you could remanage surface water on a single farm basis. So let me tell you a little bit about the things that I'd like to get into that we haven't been able to do so far. One is how all of this water stress and water sustainability, how do those issues impact our ecosystems, particularly our coastal ecosystems here, and the animals and so on and so forth. Another one that's really near and dear to my heart is the health aspects. Certainly globally, perhaps this is a little more important right now, but here you might think of things like mosquitoes as vectors for health and disease in our region as well. So it isn't just global, but here. We don't have any economic people on our team, but it turns out, as you can imagine, water sustainability is a huge economic factor in the development of almost everything that you could think of. Here's a liquefied natural gas plant site in Lake Charles. It takes hundreds of millions of gallons a year of water to run one of those plants. We also are working on areas of food, energy, water nexus. What that means is, in a nutshell, it takes water to make food through irrigation, and it takes water to make energy through power plant cooling. And so there's all these little links and intricacies there that we have to understand, particularly when we're running out of water. So the motto for, I think, what we're trying to do with this study is to solve problems regionally and export them globally. And so that's what we're trying to do. These are the people we've been working with on this project. And I'd encourage anyone who's interested to try and get involved, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it. So thank you.